Welcome to the Clause YouTube channel.
Together, we strive for a safer, secure, and more stable world.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Strategic Frontlines, our podcast series. Today we will be discussing Xi's China, decoding leadership politics in CPC and the road to the 21st Party Congress. With me I have Rahul Karan Reddy. He's a senior research associate at ORCA, and joining me is Dogu Nagamaleshwar Rao, his research assistant at Close. So our topic today, we are here to explore the dynamics of leadership under Xi Jinping. To the uninitiated, we know that party and government are indistinguishable in China. They both serve the same purpose with the same hierarchy. So, to begin, how would you describe the internal leadership politics in Xi Jinping?
Thank you, Ashu and Dr. Nagamaleshwar Rao for having me on. I think for more than a decade or so that we've seen Xi Jinping in power as the General Secretary, we've seen there's been a significant consolidation of his power at the top. And I think the 20th Party Congress is where we see this power has peaked. And I think as a result of that, we've noticed that Xi Jinping can bypass a lot of institutional checks and systems like the term limits or the age limits and things like that. So I think an overview of how the internal party politics has played out and how the power consolidation has happened, you can look at it through three sort of lenses. The first is party personnel. We've seen that she has positioned leaders and loyalists, especially in positions at the three highest bodies, the Standing Committee and the Politburo and the Central Committee. So you have appointments at the 20th Party Congress, think Shui Xiang and Li Xi, Cai Xi and Li Qiang. All of these leaders are close to Xi. They've worked with him in the past before. And you see the same thing replicated in the Politburo as well. Li Feng, He Weitong, Li Shulei, Shu Taifeng, Li Kanqie, they're all Xi associates. So at the top level, there's no more factional balance, and the collective leadership principle has been sidelined a little bit. So that's a big way in which the internal dynamics of elite party politics has changed. There's something also interesting here is that technocrats have become another way in which Xi Jinping has created his own network of loyalists and supporters. And the second lens I think I would look at this through is the military, and we've seen that it's an instrument of control, and here too Xi has surrounded himself with associates and confidants, people he trusts. So you look at it's not just the CMC, but it's also about the number of generals that have been promoted since Xi Jinping was General Secretary. I think so far 80 generals have been appointed by Xi himself, which is the most for any General Secretary. And it's also part of the modernization program, because absolute loyalty and discipline has been instilled as one pillar of the broader modernization program. And I think third lens that I would employ to look at this internal sort of the shifting dynamics is that is sort of policy control, the top-down policy preference that Xi Jinping has through, you look at leading small groups which have now become commissions themselves for national security, comprehensive deepening of reforms, for economic and financial work. So all of this, essentially increases the direct oversight and the coordination that she is able to exercise over key policy domains. And obviously another instrument that is sort of overarching everything is Xi Jinping Thought, which has become the sort of policy framework for finding solutions to any policy problem. And besides this, I think there have been a few key things I think we should note, which is the anti-corruption campaign for one. That's sustained Xi's authority to a significant degree, and there's the ideological ecosystem that's been created by the party apparatus also. The two upholds, the four consciousnesses, all of these are basically creating this ecosystem where it reinforces Xi Jinping's centrality. I think even the latest article that Xi Jinping published last week in Shosher, I think tells us a little bit about how unity has been emphasized, struggle has been emphasized. All of this centralizes Xi at the core of all this.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, Rahul. So you're talking about consolidation of power. So I would like to note 2 points, which are how did Xi Jinping institutionalize the Xi Jinping thought? although there were other thoughts like Mao Zedong thought and Deng Xiaoping thought, and three representatives from the Tiananmen, Hu Jintao's what do you call it? Harmonious world and harmonious society. Can you speak a little bit about how did he institutionalize and how did that play in the role of standing committee and Politburo?
I think Xi Jinping Thought, like I said, is the overarching principle that has been since 2017. We saw it first, and then 2022 it was reinforced. So Xi Jinping Thought has become the architecture for thinking about any policy problem and enforcing a solution through that lens. I think leaders at the standing committee level, at the Politburo level, they've all internalized that framework, and it's become a regular pronouncement in all policy documents, in all state council documents, in all party documents that have come about. So, and it's been written into the constitution. So officially it is the state's official ideology. So over a period of, and I think a large part of it comes down to the fact that personal power itself has been increased so significantly that it allows Xi to create this framework and push it through and have people adopt it. And if you surround yourself with allies and supporters and loyalists, it becomes that adoption of that thought becomes easier. And I think it creates a little bit of pressure, I think, on finding on the previously understood flexibility that local leaders perhaps had in terms of devising, creative or innovations or adaptations to policies based on the local level problems they had. So I think that's a unique pressure that's come about. But I think since 2017 and then in 2022, we've seen Xi Jinping Thought become the central policy framework for all challenges that emerge.
Rahul, when Deng Xiaoping became the General Secretary, and it's about basically a post-Mao period. So we saw that was a one-man rule, a strong-man rule. Then after Deng Xiaoping, your collective leadership came in, and after Xi again, that started to erode away, right? So keeping that in mind, are there any internal checks within the CPC? And if they are, what are the impact on Xi's power within the party?
My argument would be that there are very minimal checks on Xi Jinping's power in the party. I think usually the attention turns to party elders who may form some kind of informal check on Xi Jinping's power. But again, we saw with the Hu Jintao incident at the 20th Party Congress that's not exactly the case. Even at the Party Congress, there was a body constituted of all the senior party leaders who had retired itself. So there's been a co-option of the elders of the party to a certain extent as well. So party elders, are not exactly that kind of a check. At the same time, so then there is the other question of is there a factional balance at the highest levels of the party that might act as a check, or at least provide a different opinion to policy solutions? We see that that factional balance has eroded to a significant degree as well. Li Keqiang has passed away. Hu Chunhua didn't get the promotion. So the Youth League, which was counterweight to Xi's own the Princeling faction, has sort of that also has sort of been eroded away to a significant extent. If you look at institutional checks, term limits, age limits, so Xi Jinping has applied age limits very selectively. For those leaders he has considered irreplaceable, those term limits have not been applied, but for those he would like to have applied them for, he has applied them, and they've been moved out and they've been retired. So again, age limits, and as far as term limits are concerned, term limits were scrapped for the president and vice president. For the general secretary, they've never existed. So there are no as far as institutional checks or normative checks are concerned, they don't exist. So yeah, I would say there are hardly any internal checks, so to speak, at least no robust ones.
Yeah. See, looking into the internal checks and fractional politics, when you don't have these, how would Xi Jinping follow up on succession politics, on bureaucratic reshuffles, which are important? Okay, for any country, you need to think of what is the future. Okay, today we have a strong leader. You can do whatever the leadership guides you. But what about the succession politics and bureaucratic reshuffles? Because bureaucracy also plays a bigger role in China. So can you follow up on it?
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right about the fact that the bureaucratic reshuffles and controlling personnel, I think, are the core of the power that Xi Jinping exercises. Chen Shi is a very, very close associate to Xi Jinping. He was college roommates, now at the Central Party School, which is in charge of training young officials, right? So you have someone very trusted who's in charge of managing the appointment of personnel. And recently, Shu Taifeng and Li Kanqie switched portfolios at the highest level, which tells you that if even there is a slight hint that personnel appointments are not giving the optimal outcome and optimal results, then there is going to be a swift change in the kind of personnel that are appointed. And Li Kanqie was obviously a close associate, I think came up under the wing of Chen Shi himself. But I think if you look at personnel appointments, I think it will become increasingly relevant from now until 2027. What happens in terms of the provincial leadership, in terms of who's given the spotlight to handle major problems, who's given a charge of policy direction. Like we're seeing Li Qiang, for example, is being given more of a role over the last year to handle the economy and so on. So I think the most important thing to watch out for in the context of the 20th Party Congress will be personnel reshuffles that happen at the highest level, but also at the provincial level as well.
Yeah. So talking about the Party Congress, the 21st Party Congress is approaching in 2 years, and she will be betting for a fourth term if all goes well, right? And we see he had his agendas, right? During the 20th Party Congress, there was still some agendas that were left to be achieved. One of them is reunification of the motherland, as they call it. Taiwan is still a lingering issue. Their economy has started to falter. It's plateauing, to say the least. So, what do you think will be the likely agenda of the 21st Party Congress?
I think that's a very interesting question that everyone wants the answer to, and it's a very, every China watcher's favorite parlor game to figure out who's getting appointed at the Party Congress. I think very quickly, so again, 2027 is going to be a major milestone because, like you said, she will be batting for a fourth term. The top priorities will depend on what the political outcomes are at the Congress, obviously. But there are some priorities that are already built into what the Congress is going to be about. Science and technology breakthroughs will definitely feature high on the agenda because we've seen that it's been a year defined by the race to dominate AI and the race to secure your supply chains when it comes to key technology. So I think that is something that will feature very strongly. At the same time, what have always been traditional focuses, which is like maintaining economic growth, that will continue, but also addressing new challenges that have only come to the surface over the last 5 years. Like, for example, there's talk of a new development model for real estate. So that's going to be something we see. And I think personally, what I think we might see more of is more attention being paid to the demographic problem, which will have implications for China's economy, for social stability, and all kinds of other things. So I think those broadly might be the themes that we'll see. But also national security, I think, will emerge. Resilience of China to shocks, external and internal, will be a big priority. So you see the white paper that came out recently that I think is a testament to the fact that national security, stability will become important. And as sort of touching on what you said earlier about personnel, I think what we'll see with leadership reshuffles is, I think it's a little too early to speculate on what the reshuffle will be like. But I think there's a debate in the academic community right now that Xi Jinping is preparing for a succession. There is a bit of, but this happens in a periodic way, where either there is talk of Xi preparing for succession, or that Xi Jinping is ill in some way, or this is a regular thing. But again, I'm not so convinced by that. It started because there was a regulations that was put forward at the Politburo meeting in June 30th, and there's two interpretations. One is that the regulations are about chastising Xi Jinping for being overbearing and exerting too much control. The other interpretation is that this is just another way for him. This is just another expression or manifestation of the top-down policy control and the horizontal sort of integration of his policy control that he already has. So I tend to agree with the latter. So as far as succession is concerned, it's a little early. If we look at some of the look at some of the specific candidates that we might see, what that might look like. I think only Ting Shui Xiang is eligible at the moment to receive a second term at the standing committee, because he'll be 64 in 2027. Everyone else is going to be over 68. So there could be a high turnover of personnel at the 21st Party Congress. And at the Politburo too, there's a lot of leaders, Xu Taifeng, He Lifeng, Chang Luoxia, Wang Yi, they will all be over 68. So there's a lot of conversation going on about who the new faces are, who will replace these leaders. There's talk of, you can look at some very established patterns of the past, like, the Shanghai Party Secretary will receive a promotion. So, Chen Jining is a good candidate for that. There's also some interesting new names that have been thrown up in the academic community over the last, I think, about a year or so. Liu Jie, for the former governor of Zhejiang; Yin Yong, the mayor of Beijing; Chu Chongming, the former vice minister of finance; Shi Xiaolin, the governor of Sichuan. These are some names, but all of them have the same. They come from Fujian, they have connections to Fujian, they have connections to Zhejiang, or they have the Tsinghua University sort of alumni network. They come from there. So I think, looking at their connections and their credentials, their political credentials, I think will tell us about who's going to be appointed. And as far as policy priorities are concerned, I think there is going to be no major change in the direction of travel that we've seen. Politics will continue to guide all aspects of development. Security will be the first principle of development. So I think majorly the policy priorities will not change.
Okay. Since we're talking about 21st Party Congress, there are established practices before Xi Jinping came. It's like checking who would become the vice chairman of CMC. Most probably he would become a general secretary. And there used to be a practice, the successor will be appointed either 2 years in Hu Jintao and 1 year in other cases. So since we have 2 years time, and now there are no factions, no groups which are as influential as before. And the vice chairmen of CMC, both of them will be vacant. So how do you see the upcoming Central Committee CPC Congress in September?
I think if there is going to be a successor, like you said, there will be 2 years of time given to that person, either to groom him, to prepare him for the office, to give him more of the spotlight, and to see how the party is responding, how other factions, however limited their power might be, how they will respond, and how the person itself adjusts. So if we see, I think from now up until 2027 is when we'll have to watch for any of those signals. But there is no contender at the moment. There is no clear signal. There is no person who you would say is a clear candidate for that job. And like you said, with the CMC, there are so many vacancies that could be filled at the moment. It would be surprising if anyone wanted to fill those vacancies at the rate at which they're being removed from office. It's a very dangerous job to have at the moment. So you'll have to watch very closely for who from the provincial leadership, for example, is being elevated to the central positions as well. So there's a lot of signals to watch for in terms of what the personnel appointments are likely to be, and especially for someone like Xi Jinping, it will be someone that he controls. And in that, from that perspective, some of the technocrats that have been given the 20th, who have Politburo positions, they seem like good candidates because they have no political base of their own. So they rely entirely on their political mobility on Xi Jinping entirely. So Ma Xingwei, Yuan Chiachun, Chen Jining, these are some names that could secure a promotion to the standing committee, but can't really say that they are successor candidates just yet because they have no independent political power of their own. So how will they stand up to scrutiny against any counterweights that might emerge?
Yeah, when you say political power of their own, right? When we see from Jiang Zemin's time, the party secretaries or general secretaries used to come from a faction. Either it was Communist Youth League or it was a Shanghai League. Now we see that it's Xi's own factions, right? And one can say that the the party secretary, the general secretaries, power came from the faction, and he exercised power through collective leadership. And it was during Xi's first term also. There were faction leaders in that. But after 20th Party Congress, it's Xi's faction, right?
Yeah.
And they are getting power from Xi, not the other way around. Xi is getting power from the faction. So it makes it difficult for someone else to come in and be another leader, because they don't have factions now, or they are in limbo, right?
True.
Yeah. So shifting on to domestic politics, what are your thoughts on economic restructuring? They tried dual circulation during COVID. Real estate is in a mess. Innovation is one thing that we can say, yeah, it's being boomed. Continuing on, what are the strategic ambitions regarding BRI, or it's a global security initiative or global development initiatives, and what are your thoughts on Taiwan, South China Sea, the tech decoupling from the West?
So, firstly, with respect to the economic slowdown part of it that China has seen, but so over the last year or so, we've seen Li Qiang take up more of that position where he's managing economic policy and making sure that there's more economic growth, and he's been given more of that spotlight. And some of the analysis is that he's become more comfortable in exercising those roles as well. So, I think the emerging economic challenges that we'll see, I think managing that will take enormous effort from the party. Those are just internal problems. You have external problems as well, like with the trade war and so on. So that's going to be a persistent source of uncertainty. And you see this in the way that Xi Jinping talks about the future. It's about great risks that he sees in the future, that it's going to get more and more difficult. The challenges are going to get more complicated. The environment is possibly going to get more hostile and difficult to maneuver. So I think as far as the sort of international position that China has, its participation in the global economic order are concerned, I think there's it's going to be a very difficult environment to navigate for Xi Jinping and for China as well. So I think you look at, but I think this is also historically how it's been, is whenever there has been moments of a crisis is when there has been an opportunity. So we look at difficult times right now where there's a trade war and things like that. So you see Xi Jinping doing his tour of Southeast Asia, for example, the Central Asia summit that happened recently. All those things I think are telling us something very interesting about how China is navigating its international image, and so it's trying to signal its increasing reliability in the face of greater unpredictability we're seeing from the US. So that international image is coming from there. And it's also about securing confidence in the fact that China is the primary economic engine for the world, the primary driver of globalization still. And this has a lot of appeal to countries around the world because their prosperity has come from trade and openness. So if China is appearing to stand for those same values, China gives a lot of currency from that kind of projection. And all of this foreign policy is being conducted under Xi Jinping's signature framework, which is the Community for Shared Future of Mankind. And I think even the BRI, GSI, GDI, these are all being offered as under that. So, even like the Central Asia Summit was very interesting because you have a treaty that was signed for the first time, a multilateral treaty that brings these Central Asian countries into the same club as China's relationship with Russia, Pakistan, and North Korea, the highest level of strategic coordination that exists. And each of these relationships, I think, it's securing some very vital strategic objectives for China. So as there is more uncertainty in the international environment, we're seeing that China is taking the opportunity to signal its own heightened relevance for the world, for economic growth, and its willingness to take on a leadership role as well. So I think sensing this uncertainty, China has moved quickly to and leveraged it as an opportunity.
Okay, Rahul, since we're talking about China shaping its own international image, since the COVID, the post-COVID world order has been different, and the views on China has been different. So, what is the difference that you see towards taking China in the economic partnerships or security partnerships, although they don't call alliance? Some of them they have the character of alliances. what is the difference that you see before COVID and after COVID? And one of the things that she also tried to bring is exporting China model, which is a kind of pragmatic approach to exporting ideology, which you cannot do in this age of time where nobody is willing to take somebody's ideology.
Yeah.
But the models are more appealing, it seems. So can you give me whatever you feel that there's some change or there's no change?
I think that's a great point actually, because there has been a significant change there. It's no longer about exporting revolution, it's about exporting a development model. So it's about, like I said earlier, it's about signaling that China is the preferred economic partner to countries around the world. And this fits into the way that China's messaging to the global south is shaping up. So in the face of greater US non-participation or confrontational participation with countries like Vietnam or any of these countries in Southeast Asia or in the global south, we see that the US has limited engagement there, but the Chinese have decided to engage much more intensely and institutionalize their engagement as well through summits and through secretariats and so on. So I think the export now is development, and the economic sort of partnership that China offers is the attraction. That's the carrot. And it leads the way for broader cooperation in security issues. And, the BRI sort of fits into the same framework as well. Because of BRI offerings, you have countries more willing to engage with China in security and defense cooperation as well.
Rahul, I have one more intervention, which is like, I want to understand what is the change after COVID? Is there any change? Because the COVID has impacted China's image. Okay. So if it is getting accepted, that means they're doing something better than what others have been done. Second point that you said about the BRICS, you were talking about the BRICS expansion before. Global South, China sees itself as a champion of Global South. But in the recent BRICS summit, Xi Jinping opted out and then sending Li Qiang. So what's your take on this?
I think as far as the BRICS summit is concerned, the Xi Jinping not being there has fueled a lot of other speculation about Xi Jinping losing control of the party and so on. That's a periodic, recurring kind of speculation that happens almost semi-annually. So there's not much you can say about that other than the fact that over 12 years we've seen Xi has perhaps been absent from public view several times, but it's not meant that he's lost power. He's not attended meets before when there was the G20 in India. He wasn't here. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's losing power. So those narratives, I think, we can sort of put to one side. As far as the international image post-COVID is concerned, there was a period where immediately after COVID, it was about a very assertive wolf warrior diplomacy that we saw, where China was much more assertive. That some of those parts have remained, where China's foreign policy is much more willing to, in their terms, stand up for themselves when it comes to aggression in the face of the US, or by bullying by the US, as they call it. So there, the assertiveness has remained, but it's not been. We see there's a much more conciliatory, or there's a carrot being offered when it comes to how China will engage with the global South or with countries in places like Africa and Latin America. So I think the international image that China has, it depends on who you ask, really.
Yeah. So Rahul, let me play the devil's advocate. Right? You said that she has been missing before. Those things are right. Even before the 20th Party Congress, there were those propaganda videos, whatever, tanks rolling down Beijing and all that.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. There's a coup happening, nothing of that sort. The people knew that. But what we see now is that when she became president, he started a lot of small leading groups, right? And he was the one who was heading them. And a lot of those groups became central groups, right? Like the group on Hong Kong and Macau and so on and so forth. There was an interesting article in Xinhua recently which said that Xi Jinping is delegating more of his power even in the small leading groups.
Yeah.
So what is that indicator of? Does it indicate that that one main rule that he was propagating is not the norm anymore? He is going back to the collective leadership style. If yes, why does he feel the need to do that now? Since he will be seeking 4 terms and he would need more absolute power to hold on to power, right? So why is he doing it now?
It's difficult to say what the thinking is on these kinds of things, but the delegation of work to people like Li Qiang and Cai Chi, we've seen it perhaps suggests a willingness to maybe give a little bit more sort of freedom to or autonomy to certain leaders who he trusts and he knows that they are not going to step outside the framework of what is acceptable, and also that you have to combine with the fact that there is no threat that he might perceive from them, from either the fact that they might have too much power or that they're cultivating their own network of loyalists. So I think the recent article that you mentioned, again, like I said, it started because of the readout from the Politburo meeting, and again it was interesting because some of the language in that, there was omissions of Xi Jinping Thought, there was omissions of some phrases that we've seen, and those phrases have appeared in every Politburo readout. There have been 28 Politburo readouts so far, and only 2 of them have not had any mentions. So I think that is why there's been a lot of reading into this. But this pattern, this development that you're talking about certain leaders being given more autonomy to execute policy, if that develops into a pattern, then that is interesting to examine, because that might tell us that there is something else afoot, perhaps about succession, perhaps about another process that might be in the works.
Okay. One final question. So it's right, like she is getting older, right? He's 72, he will be 72, he's 72 now, will be 74 by the time of 21st Party Congress. And he cannot handle more of day-to-day of the governance in the party, so he might delegate some things. Interestingly, Tang Xiaoping also did the same thing. If you might remember, he formed a elite group where he was head, and then only people who had 25 years of experience in government and were older than 78 were a part of that group.
Right.
Although it was disbanded after Tang Xiaoping died. So do you think she can do sort of something like that? He keeps control of CMC, leave the governance to Li Qiang or someone else?
It is entirely possible that something like that happens. At the moment, the consensus is that it's more likely that Xi Jinping retains power and becomes general secretary for the 3rd time, no change in the way the structure of the leadership is. But it is entirely likely, like I said, if this development becomes into a pattern and we see more such signals coming out, then it's likely that some kind of a system where Xi Jinping no longer manages the day-to-day affairs, but retains control over who is doing the actual implementation, the coordination. I think that pattern might tell us that there is something else that might develop, something akin to the system that Tang Xiaoping had in place, where he retains power, he retains control over the military, which is the guarantor of political power, and the day-to-day and the policy making for the most part remains in the hands of people he trusts and people he knows cannot develop their own sort of faction and cannot challenge his own authority. That's why you see technocrats taking on such a significant sort of position, because I think they have less of a political base themselves, so they end up posing little threat to Xi. So I think in this the 20th Party Congress, we saw more technocrats. I think it was the first time there was as many technocrats as there were during Chiang Samin's time. And I think next time also we'll have more of, I think the 21st Party Congress, we'll see more technocrats emerge at the central committee level, but also perhaps in the Politburo.
Yeah.
And these are the kinds of people I think that will take on the roles that she might want to be delegating.
Interestingly, fact for our viewers, during the 20th Party Congress, so we did an analysis, and around 50% of the technocrats had a background in aerospace.
Absolutely. Yuan Chechun, Mark Shengwei particularly was head of the Aerospace Institute. I mean, yeah, you have even environmental engineers receiving Politburo positions, which is very interesting. You wouldn't see that at the time. This is not just about the fact that technocrats are good for Xi Jinping, but it's the fact that the composition of the people who are sort of in the party is also changing. Party leaders are also more educated than before. They have higher degrees of education than before. So I think that's possibly the reason why.
Okay, Rahul, thank you for coming, and we had a very interesting conversation. And what most importantly is like the points that you have raised. All of them are like such research doesn't happen in most of the time. Taking the balanced view, looking at the signals, what is happening, and instead of making it taking a radical view, okay, this is going to happen, this is not going to happen. Yeah, it's a very balanced one. And for our listeners, Center for Land Warfare Studies is an independent think tank. We do research on national security, defense. We have on China two programs. One is China Talkies, which I will be handling, and there's a new NPC watch is coming, which Ashu will take care. He will be looking at all the laws which are in the draft stage. Maybe it's published, Central Commission approved stage. So those will be Ashu will be looking at them. So thank you.
Thank you for having me on. Great, it was lovely to chat, and I look forward to reading more at the China Talkies and the NPC Watch.
Thanks, Rahul.